Hi there, my name is Liz Salamy Abess. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ and a recovering codependent. So it's nice to be here. I've met some of you. Thank you. Hi.
Welcome.
Thank you. I've met some of you before, and it's nice to be in a room with people who get it, people in recovery. Some of the things I'm going to share tonight, it's my experience, and some of it may sound kind of out there if you're new. I invite you just to sit back and relax, take it in. It all begins with our first step. For me, it was about 40 years in the making before I learned some of these lessons, and they finally stuck. But my talk is about how to stop managing someone else's life and start fulfilling your own purpose. I'll never forget the first time I responded with codependency in my marriage. It was years in the making, like I said, and I didn't see it at first. It took decades to really see that, and even longer to find freedom and find my own joy and purpose. My childhood predestined me to be codependent. My brother was an addict for about 20 years, and just watching my parents enabling him. I love my brother, I adored him. But when we live with someone with high needs, we learn to manage that person, whether it's addiction, mental illness, or another chronic health issue. We learn to manage that person and mitigate the chaos by controlling them and our environment. That can teach us codependency skills that can last a lifetime. And I'm sure that sounds familiar to some of you, and we can become controlling. Does that sound familiar to anybody? Ever been accused of? Yeah, right? It's not surprising I married someone with high needs. He needed me, and that was what I was used to. That was familiar, so it worked for us in the beginning. But unlike our other first, the first time we drive a car, maybe the first time we kiss someone, we don't remember, which I don't remember, but a lot of people do. We don't always remember the first time we were codependent in a relationship until we look back through a distant lens. And then only if we're willing to recognize it, if we're willing to change. So I'll be talking about my brother and my husband and this pattern I carried and the years of research. I did researching, treatment, a lot of work to get healthy, and I'm hoping my story will help you. And some of this is awkward, but it's my story, right? So all I can do now is decide how to process it, how to hold it. Can't change it. So let me take you back 20 years ago. I was at a concert, a Journey concert. Steve Gary was the lead singer then, and yeah, right? And I was so happy to be there. He was singing Wheel in the Sky. Those high lingering notes rang out over the crowd. I was with my then husband and our best friends, another couple, and it was a big deal. It was a connection to my brother, who had died from a heroin overdose. So I was so excited to go to have this moment. And I could just feel the breeze caressing us, the notes ringing out over the crowd. Everybody's engaged, kind of like a crowd does, right? You're all on the same page, just really enjoying it. And it was fulfilling a bucket list item, a connection, like I said, with my brother. And then my husband says, someone is smoking pot nearby. I can't believe I'm surrounded by stoners. I'm like, wait, what? I kind of frown and I look over and I could see he was stiff and stoic. So I tried to ignore it, but now I can smell it too. This was before pot was legal. I can smell it too, and I'm just hoping it'll go away, right? I'm trying to focus back on the concert. We hadn't been to many concerts. We had young kids and been married 10 years, but it was a big deal to get a babysitter to go out. He listened to 80s pop, I listened to classic rock, so we didn't have that in common, so it was a big deal to get him to go, and like I said, with our friends, trying to dance to the music and really enjoy it. And then he says, I effing hate that you used to be a stoner. I frowned, stunned, right? And his tone. And now the song disappears, right? Like a sandcastle crushes a wave. I stiffen, I look at my friend, and what am I gonna say to her? I mean, I didn't say anything, but suddenly I'm ashamed I ever smoked pot, something that had never really bothered me before. I hate this, he says. And now it's a drum solo, and I'm trying to again, listen through my brother's ears, because he used to sit me down and have me listen to music, listen to that hi-hat, listen to that bass drum, and I kind of hated it, but I loved it, but I hated it at the time, but it taught me so much. So I'm kind of trying to relive that. But my husband is just whispers, I can't stand this, I'm leaving. I'm like, wait, what? My chest tightens, my jaw clenches. All of a sudden, the journey moment with my brother stops dead. And I focus on his needs, his emotional dive. What do you mean you're leaving? I can't believe I married a stoner. I can't do this. Like, I'm not a stoner. I haven't smoked pot in 15 years. Like, what are you talking about? I knew I had no idea how to fix this, but that I had to do it. I'm in total fight or flight mode now. Everything has shifted to him. He's like, I can't do this, I'm leaving. And I'm like, leaving me, leaving the world, leaving our marriage, leaving the concert. I had no idea. I just knew I had to do something. And I did. I had to prove my marriage was worthy, that I was worthy. And I did that night. And we stayed and finished the concert. It was not fun anymore. I didn't know that was the beginning of a pattern of losing myself, of rescuing, enabling, of codependent behavior that had started in my childhood and carried throughout my life. Obviously, I responded appropriately that night, and I figured after that, I feared another trigger. So, and it actually stole my grieving moment with my brother. I had actually been in a deep depression before that because I hadn't grieved my brother. But my needs went on the back burner, and I stashed rock music for the next 20 years. My kids today in their late 20s are like, Mom, we don't even know rock music. All our friends know it, and I'm like, yeah, sorry. But it wasn't worth it for me at that point. So that was the beginning of losing myself, right? Losing my identity, making his emotional needs more important than mine. He was a workaholic. That was how he managed his ish. It wasn't drinking, it wasn't drug, it was work. And there are a lot of different ways, right? We can, things we can be addicted to that help fill our holes, and that was his. But we had a good marriage for a lot of years. I don't want to take that away. I didn't see it. And like I said, until I did see it. But I always knew there was something wrong underneath, something not quite right. And our roles evolved unnoticed, like the daily reshaping of a shoreline. Maybe you've seen at a lake or an ocean where you can see where the water comes, and you come back the next day or week or month and it's different. But you don't notice it. It's slowly changing, evolving over time. So that's my story. I spent most of my life responding with codependence until I made a decision for freedom from codependency. And you can too. We all can. Like everything else, it takes work. And I worked a lot. I'm still a work in progress. Anyone recognize or relate to my story? Yeah. And this could be any relationship, a parent, a spouse, a kid, a sibling. Yeah. So in my childhood home with my older brother in addiction, I watched my parents, really just a standard family, loving family, but try to keep the peace, try to keep up appearances. This was back in the 70s before it was so common, sadly, today. So they did just enable him, fix him, thought they were doing the right thing, but they were actually doing him a disservice, but they didn't know that. And I just watched and learned from them how they kept the peace, and I carried that into my marriage. So you can see, connect the dots, how it went from my childhood into my marriage. I watched and learned how to show up, how to fix someone, and how that got me love and attention. The seed is the hardest part. Once we do it, we can't unsee it. So now the question is, what do we do about it? And I'm not a big fan of the word codependency. I think it's overused. You're so codependent kind of thing. Maybe you've heard someone say that. But I'm talking about paralyzing codependency, when you are losing your identity on behalf of someone else. Codependency is when we seek a desire for approval, an unhealthy attachment to another, traditionally someone who was or is addicted to something. And it's kind of an addiction too, when our value lies in the attachment. When we please to stay safe, don't leave me. That's where the in codependence comes from. It's about how we respond. And Melody Beattie, probably you guys have heard of Codependent No More. She wrote that in '86, and she says now, in a more recent book, that she believes now, even more than then, that codependent people or people who've been in drug or alcohol addiction, when they peel back the layers in sobriety, and it can take 7 years, they notice codependency underneath. It's another thing that like I said, an addiction can be anything, and it's a coping mechanism. The problem is when we lose ourselves, our own identity, by focusing on someone else, and we're not able to fulfill our own God-given purpose. So if you're consumed with like I was, we're going to talk about how to stop managing someone else's life, to find freedom, right? To step out of the cycle and start fulfilling your own purpose. Revision is the word I use. It's when we recognize and release our need to fix people. It empowers them and us. Healing begins with recognizing roles, so 3 things: recognizing roles, letting go, and embracing change. Recognizing roles. First, admitting our denial, right? We all know that's the beginning of recovery. But what is codependent behavior? Are you overly engaged on someone else's behaviors, emotions, or actions? Are you validated by rescuing? Does managing someone give you purpose or earn you love and attention? Make you feel safe? Is your identity tied up in the needs of someone else? Are you super busy and that can give you an opportunity to escape from dealing with yourself? Or is your life often chaotic and like, for instance, a workaholic, where it's even noble, but it's a distraction from dealing with your own hard emotions? Is it hard to let go of attachments, even unhealthy relationships? And are you controlling? Come back to that. Codependents have excellent skills. We get stuff done. The problem is, again, losing ourselves by focusing on other people when we're not able to fulfill our own purpose. I spent me engaging in my husband's needs. He was a workaholic, 70, 80 hours a week, young kids at home, and I made that possible for him. I covered for him, explained his absences when he missed his son's all-star game, or when he left a vacation early, or didn't go altogether. Or there was a season where we would have dinner parties with our friends, like in our 30s, and I had wedding stuff, cute stuff, and we would rotate houses and take turns. And the host would always be a different host, and you'd go to a big deal. Made a big deal out of it when it was your turn. And half the time he would call a half hour before and say, "I can't make it, I'm stuck at work, something happened." And I'd call the host and cover for him, make it sound good. And so I was enabling him. And then I realized it's not my job. It's his job, God's job, to manage his issues, not mine. And so I said, I'm not going to do that anymore. You have to call. And guess what? He stopped canceling. So he began to grow as well. It helped his friendships, and I began to grow. Number 2, letting go. Acknowledging when that you accommodate other people's lives, you enable them, you lose yourself, and they lose responsibility for their own life. Right? You're not doing them a favor. So letting go is the next step in our recovery. If you've been dependent on someone else's behaviors or emotions or actions, this can be difficult at first. If you're used to solving someone's problems, it means letting go. That's letting go of what is familiar to you. It's allowing a space inside you that the other person filled by needing you, by giving you purpose. So we're just talking about baby steps, 1% changes. And to give yourself grace, because recovery takes years. It's about changing how we respond. My brother would ask for money I need money for gas, or for a dealer who's gonna kill me, or for I'm hungry, or whatever it was. And I finally said, I'll give you money. I'll pay your dealer. Well, of course he didn't want me to do that. I'm sure he was trying to score, and I couldn't contribute to his abuse anymore. I started letting go of making his needs my needs. I was letting go of responsibility for him. And that was scary, right? Because I knew it was gonna distance us, and you don't know what's gonna happen, especially if someone's suicidal. It is scary. And no one likes change. But I had to accept that for his sake and mine. And I'm not suggesting anyone leave a relationship or go drastic on anyone. It's just, like I said, baby steps that serve you both. And he reached rock bottom sooner and did start recovery for a season. Number 3 is embracing change. So to codependent people, like I said, get stuff done. We make phone calls, we see problems, we develop solutions, we do research. Problem is we're usually doing it on behalf of someone else instead of on our own behalf. So how can we use the skills towards fulfilling our own purpose? We want to shift the focus from our person to ourselves to revise our own story. I stopped focusing on my brother's needs and let him handle on my husband's needs and start to let him handle his own issues. And this was years later, but I started listening to Journey again, pursuing my dreams. I became a reporter for a local paper. I started contributing to Sacramento Magazine, writing personal histories, and he finally let it go. Decided to not hassle me, and we both found more peace. And it was a process, but I revised my story. I made tiny shifts towards my own needs and goals that hadn't mattered for years. I started teaching. I wrote a book on being a sibling of an addict that I'm revising now. I did the work to find freedom and healing, and you can too. It's not a straight line. I'm still a work in progress, as we know, in recovery. But first, I began recognizing my role in unbalanced relationships. Second, I began letting go, releasing people a little bit. And third, began embracing change and revising my own story. So now some more real life situations. Let's practice or start to consider how we can respond differently. If your person comes home high, I recommend you just don't engage. Like literally zip it, cover your mouth if you need to. Because you know in that situation, you're gonna have the same cycle conversation you've had 1,000 times that's just gonna lead to defeat, anger, and frustration. In fact, on my website, I have a thing, 5 steps to shift out of a codependent conversation. You can find when the newsletter pop up. So the next thing we want to do, real life practice, is do a little role play, which is super easy, but I'm hoping I can get a volunteer to come up here and role play with me.
Jennifer.
All right. So I'm the kid. Okay. You're the parent. My boss is mad at me. I was late again and I might get fired, so I might have to move back in.
Why were you late?
Yeah, right? Okay. Yeah, exactly. Well, here's what I'm going to suggest. Some people might say, well, yeah, why were you late? Okay, you can move back in, but is that really helping the person? The old me would say, didn't you set your alarm? You can't keep being late like that. If you ever want to get anywhere in life, you have to be on time.
Or early.
Yes. The new version, a different response. Wow, that really stinks. I'm so sorry, but you can't live here. Any thoughts about what you can do differently in order to keep your job? So that's not enabling, right? It's loving and supportive, but it's not fixing it. All right, we have a couple more minutes. Let's do one more. Just came up with this one. I need to borrow money to pay my parking tickets or they're gonna lock up my wheels.
Why can't you pay for it?
Same thing, but you're starting the cycle with that, right? Because then they're blah, 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 and I just give me some money, whatever the situation might be. How about, oh gosh, it would suck to lose your car. I'm so glad you have a bike. I'm sorry I can't help you. Maybe you could do some odd jobs to earn some money to pay off the parking tickets.
Can you assign odd jobs?
Well, yeah, I would, if they said, but literally make them do it. Yeah. If they are willing to and engage. Thank you. Good job. In summary, it took years before I recognized the roles, began letting go and embracing change. I didn't know what was wrong. I just knew my life was chaotic. It was out of control. I was micromanaging. I was FOMO. You probably know, fear of missing out. I got therapy for my mind, prayer for my spirit, yoga for my body, journaling, gratitude, 1% changes over and over. And if you do start to do some of these things, I encourage you to record your wins, right? In the Bible, they talk about recording things, the stones at the Jordan River, and it just helps give us hope because we begin to start to see the pattern. Healing day by day by trusting God. It was probably 15 years, but now I'm so free. I still have moments, of course, but now I help others, which is what we do in recovery. I invite you to become part of a growing community, a community of people who get it, who get you. You can make a decision for freedom from codependency, and it starts with revision. So thank you for letting me be here. I appreciate you.